everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Running the Bases podcast. I am your host, Michael Garaffa, and we are here with episode 2 of covering injuries during the coronavirus and how the coronavirus will impact the future of injuries in the sport. Now, last week we spoke all about the American League side of the injuries on this coin and how the coronavirus will be impacting how players will be impacted in the beginning of the 2020 season. Now, the main reason why I'm doing this is because coronavirus pushing back the start of the MLB season will clearly have a huge impact on a lot of things, but I decided to focus on injuries. And now, obviously, there are going to be a lot of players that are going to miss the 2020 season completely, but there are players that would be in question for the beginning of the season that now they have a good chance of starting the season with their team. So I'm going to follow the same order that I did in the last episode, and that is going to be by going from NL East all the way through the NL West. And we're going to kick it right off with the Atlanta Braves. And this is a guy who they actually acquired in this offseason, Cole Hamels. Now, Cole Hamels is a starting pitcher for the Braves, and he is going to be replacing Dallas Keuchel in that lineup. But again, you can't really be sure as to how he's going to play. Obviously, the Braves are hoping that Cole Hamels will be as good as Dallas Keuchel was in the second half of last season. But he had some left shoulder soreness, which is supposed to keep him out possibly through April. But you never know. And obviously, that timetable has passed now. So Cole Hamels, who probably wasn't going to be ready for opening day, most likely would have missed a few starts. He was anticipated to be back by the beginning of April, but obviously you don't really know with injuries like this. So with him possibly being out through the beginning of April, he would have missed a good couple of starts. That would have impacted a good start to the Braves season. Might have hurt some of their, if they had momentum, it would have hurt some of that momentum, because if he was coming up to pitch on a day where they had 3 games in a row that they won, you never know. That could have been the difference of winning 4 in a row or ending that winning streak. But we move over to the Miami Marlins. Drew Steckenrider had an August 2019 elbow surgery. And now Drew, he has had a pretty interesting career. Obviously, being with the Miami Marlins is not an easy thing to do because of the Marlins and how they are looked at in the sport. But he has been a pretty solid man in that rotation. And obviously, there was no real timetable. When you have elbow surgery, there's really no idea as to when you're going to come back. And there's still no timetable. But with a surgery like that, it wasn't Tommy John surgery, so you can't really put him out a year, but you never know when he is going to come back. But the chances of him returning and making an impact on the Marlins season is obviously a lot higher now than it was before. Now, for the New York Mets, this is my personal favorite team, but obviously I have to stay unbiased in this. But 2 big players that were not necessarily going to be ready for opening day now should be ready when the season comes along. And the first one is Yoenis Cespedes. Now, he has had a long string of injuries that have held him out for a few years. He hasn't played full-time really since 2015. 2016, he played a majority of the season, but the last time he played for the Mets completely without having any injuries was in the 2015 season. So it has been a long time since Yoenis Cespedes has been at his best. And really, the big problem is he has had so many injuries that have just stacked up, and he hasn't been able to recover and come back to play. But now that he is seemingly ready to come back and play and make an impact in the lineup, he was not necessarily going to be ready for opening day. But with this pushback of the season, it's basically guaranteed that Yoenis Cespedes will be starting the season with the New York Mets. The other player is another outfielder for the Mets. That is Michael Conforto. He had a right side injury, and he might have been out for opening day. Obviously, that was in question. There was a lot of people that said he should be ready for opening day. He might have missed a few days. Obviously, this isn't as important as, let's say, Yoenis Cespedes injury that could have put him out a little bit longer. But the Michael Conforto was a big guy, and anytime he's out of the lineup, that is going to impact the team. So even 4 or 5 days that he could have been out of that lineup, those are now given back to him and the team, which are going to be, hopefully for the Mets, very important as they go along throughout the season. Now, continuing along with the National League East, we have the Philadelphia Phillies. And now David Robertson, a very big reliever for the Phillies, whom they acquired last year in the offseason, had August 2019 Tommy John surgery. Now, this is a player who went into the 2019 season with such high hopes, came off an incredible postseason with the New York Yankees, and now got to play for the Philadelphia Phillies. But in August of 2019, he did have that Tommy John surgery that really put a very big weight on the Philadelphia Phillies, who were hoping to have him be a top-tier reliever in that bullpen. And that really shot down a lot of hopes for the Phillies to make it to the playoffs in the last season. So he is hoping to obviously recover, get himself back in the team's rotation for the bullpen players. And obviously you can't really guarantee that whenever you have Tommy John surgery. So David Robertson hoping to get himself back and get himself a chance to play for the team again. And another big important player will be Andrew McCutchen. Now, he's recovering from June 2019 left knee surgery, and he was very unlikely to play for opening day. And Andrew McCutchen, it's not much about his bat or his glove anymore, but it's more about his presence in the clubhouse. And obviously having him there in the lineup is a big boost. He's a very big presence in the clubhouse, a veteran player. He should be giving the Phillies a very good person in that team. It'll make them feel a lot more comfortable when he is on the team. But with him having that surgery, he would have been out most likely for opening day, and now he will probably be able to start opening day, whether it be in the lineup or on the bench. Still an important piece for the Phillies to have. And now we go over to the World Series champions from the 2019 season, wrapping up the National League East. These are the Washington Nationals. And now they got one player in this offseason that was supposed to be a big acquiring player for them, and he came from the opposing team in the World Series. That is Will Harris. He came from the Houston Astros. They signed him this offseason, the Nationals did, and he tweaked his left abdomen in spring training. And now this is a player who a lot of people had high hopes for. The Nationals are trying, obviously, to go back-to-back, but you never know. I mean, obviously, with a player like this, it's a big wild card. So the Nationals and Will Harris are hoping that he can get himself recovered and back to playing. But obviously, you have to wonder, would he have been out for a significant amount of time in the beginning of this season? Now, there's a very good chance that he will be starting opening day in that bullpen. The Cubs and the Reds in the National League Central don't have any applicable injuries. Obviously, they have some, but none of them are going to be impacting the season. And then we go over to the other teams in the National League Central, and the Milwaukee Brewers are the first team that I want to talk about here. And their big player is Corey Knebel. Now, this is a player who had April 2019 Tommy John surgery. He was expected to be back in May of 2020, and now he was one of the better players on that team. He was one of the anchors in that bullpen, obviously alongside Josh Hader. But with his absence, that is going to provide a very big bump into that bullpen. They are really hoping that they could get Corey Knebel back, because when he was good, he was one of the best pitchers in baseball, and they really are hoping that he can return. But now, with him looking like he'll be back in May, there is still a very good chance that he will be ready for opening day. So many players that were probably going to be out now will be here on opening day, and that is going to really change the dynamic of this season. There's a second player on the Milwaukee Brewers that I wanted to talk about, and that is the player that they brought over this season in a trade with the San Diego Padres. That is Luis Urias. He had surgery for a broken hamate in his left hand, and he participated in some fielding drills on March 1st. But again, you never know when he is going to be ready to play baseball with actual players. And whenever you're starting drills, it depends on the injury on a timetable when you should be expected to come back, but you never know. Obviously, you have to anticipate a guy like this who hasn't really gotten the start to his career that he was hoping for. He's really not looking for any bumps in the road, but this definitely was going to be one. However, this is seeming like it won't really impact his career anymore, because he should be able to be back for opening day. Now, it seems like the NL Central just has a lot of not applicable players, as the Pittsburgh Pirates don't have any either. So that leaves us with one more team in the Central Division that we can talk about, and that is the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, they have two players that I wanted to discuss. Jordan Hicks is a big-time closer in baseball, and he was one of the best in the game when he was going at it in the beginning of 2019. He's a guy who could throw 102, 103 consistently. It's some shades of the former Aroldis Chapman, obviously. So when he had Tommy John surgery in June of 2019, that really was a killer blow to the team. He has hopes to play in 2020, but when you have an injury like Tommy John surgery so late in the season like he did, it really hinders his ability to play in the next season. But now, you never know. If the season is going to be starting later and will actually end up playing later in the year, he has a very high opportunity of playing. But the Cardinals might have to make the playoffs for that to be possible. Now, the other player on the Cardinals is Miles Mikolas, one of the top pitchers on the team. He has a strained right forearm, and he was playing catch as of the beginning of April. So he would have definitely missed the beginning of the season. That is guaranteed. He wouldn't have been ready for opening day, but now he's making progress. He's got to get himself back, has to be prepared to play for the beginning of the season, and the Cardinals are obviously really hoping that he can do that in a very well form because he hasn't been the player that they anticipated him to be. Now we move on to the final division on this podcast today, and that is the National League West. We started off with the Arizona Diamondbacks, the local team to this podcast, and we have not really a huge injury here, but Silvino Bracho, he had March 2019 Tommy John surgery. That was most likely going to keep him out a good chunk of the 2020 season, so not as impactful of a player, but for himself as a person, obviously, you don't want to miss too much of your career, so if he can get back and play a lot of this season, that's pretty big for a guy like that. Now, we go over to the Colorado Rockies. They have a very big prospect on their team, Brendan Rodgers, who had July 2019 right shoulder surgery. Now, he is hoping that he can start his career in this 2020 season, and obviously, that is in big-time question. You don't know when he's going to be coming back. There's still no timetable, so you have to really question when is this guy going to be ready to play again. So, obviously, for his sake, a player that is hoping to jumpstart his career, this gives him a better opportunity to do so with the Colorado Rockies if he can recover himself in time. Now, there's only 3 teams left, and we go over to a very big team in the National League West that's hoping for some redemption, the Los Angeles Dodgers, one of the highest-touted teams in baseball today. Jock Peterson, a guy who was in a lot of speculation in the offseason. He had some right side pain, and opening day was going to be determined for him. That is a big guy in that lineup that even if he misses a week in the beginning of the season, that is going to impact how the Dodgers play. He is an impactful player, and he clearly has a lot of history with the team. He's a real big ringleader when it comes to starting rallies. And another guy who is important to that team is Chris Taylor. He had a left shoulder contusion that was going to put his opening day in question as well. So 2 guys that are going to be out of that lineup when opening day was supposed to happen now should find themselves in the opening day lineup when the season starts. Now, the Padres don't have any applicable players, so that brings us to the last team. That will be the San Francisco Giants. Reyes Moronta had September 2019 right shoulder surgery, and he was probably going to be back in late 2020. Now, he is a reliever for the Giants. He is not the best pitcher on that team, but again, this kind of goes back to the Silvino Bracho discussion that when you have an injury that is going to keep you out for a good chunk of your career, you really don't want to miss that, especially as a player that's not a highlight-worthy player like, let's say, a Corey Knebel that's trying to come back from a big surgery and be in a bullpen position. So Reyes Moronta obviously hoping that he can get back as quickly as possible. And if he can get back now in the middle of the season as opposed to late in the season, that'll be a big deal for him in his career. So that'll wrap up this podcast, and I hope you guys all enjoyed listening. I really appreciate you guys staying along and taking the listen. Obviously, this is a very interesting time for baseball, and we're trying to just power through here. And if we can do so pretty efficiently, that'll be a very awesome thing because baseball is going to come back. And that's all we have to keep in mind. Baseball will be back one day. And until it comes back, all we have to do is sit around and just keep in mind that baseball one day will be back in the swing of things, literally. And I can't wait for that to happen. Thank you, everybody, again. I'm your host, Michael Garaffa. Thank you all for listening. I'll see you guys all next time.